Good afternoon. How are you?
Hello there. How's it going?
Good. Hey, Kevin, how are you?
Hey everyone, how are you guys?
Good, good.
I think we can get started. Thank you everyone for joining today. If you have questions during this presentation, please put them in the chat and we'll answer them at the end as time allows. As a reminder, we'll also be sending you a link to the final recording and presentation with helpful resource links after the session. Today's 108 Degrees Marketing. Today, 108 Degrees Digital Marketing is presenting the Email Migration Planning Workshop led by Marianne Pfeiffer. Marianne is a marketing professional passionate about helping her clients reach their goals. She is the founder and principal of 108 Degrees, a woman-owned and women-led agency with over 20 years of outstanding service to small businesses, nonprofits, and educational institutions. She is also a MailChimp Pro partner with over 25 years of experience in email marketing and the author of Precision Email: 7 Lessons in Engagement Strategy. Today, Marianne leads our session as your marketing strategist, helping answer the digital marketing and brand questions that lead you to success. So without further ado, turn it over to you, Marianne.
Thank you, Lauren. Welcome. Today, we are going to talk about email migration planning. So whether you're looking to switch or you've recently switched or switching is something that you know is going to be in the future, it's important to understand that you need to take before you start the actual migration process. Worked with a lot of clients in a lot of different situations, and the worst thing is that they come in without really understanding all the questions they need to ask and the things they need to know, and then we spend the whole project in catch-up mode. So today we have a few different goals, and the most important was we want you to build an informed plan for migration. So whether you are merging two systems together, converting to a completely different one, or just trying to bring together new information into your ESP, we want to make sure you have an informed plan. And that means asking a few different questions. You have to understand what questions you need to ask so that you can plan for the migration appropriately. You need to have the right people at the table with you, because if you're missing key players, you will not be able to finish the things you need to finish. You will get stuck halfway through. I also want to make sure that if you are selecting a new ESP or working with a new ESP, that you have confidence in the ESP you've selected. ESP is email service provider, right? So that's your provider, like your MailChimp, your Constant Contact, your Klaviyo. When you are moving into this new service provider, you want to have confidence that this is going to do what you need it to do and be able to take and use the information that you're coming in with to reach your goals. And finally, once you're in there, you want to make sure that you can assess and understand your new ESP and how it's working for you. When you're moving from one system to another, what I essentially tell people is not everybody counts things the same way. And also, when you're reconciling data and merging lists together, some of your numbers are going to look different. To know whether your migration was successful, to know whether email marketing is still successful compared to last year's numbers, you need to make sure that you can assess that. So we'll talk a little bit about that. All right. First thing on the agenda is the tech stack. ESP is one piece of the tech stack. There's a lot more to it. The CRM. This is huge, right? Now, if you don't have a CRM and you're looking to implement one, it's really important that you make sure that your CRM and your ESP are going to work together. Those two pieces have to talk to each other in order to make sure that you're sharing data appropriately, effectively, and consistently. Your website is another piece. How is your information you're collecting on your website from your visitors, from your potential subscribers, making it into the ESP in a way that makes sense for your marketing plan? You need to think about ad platforms. You need to think about, if you're a nonprofit, your donor sites, or if you're selling online, your e-commerce sites. All of these different tech pieces play a role together. Maybe you do event registration. That could be in person, that could be online. And what other lead capture tools do you have? Maybe you have lead pages that you're using where you're collecting information. Maybe you're capturing leads through partner sites. So all of these pieces of the tech stack, before you start your migration plan, start by talking to everyone who's involved in using technology that will affect your ESP. There's nothing worse than going through this whole thing and coming to the end and realizing that you can't sync two things together that need to be synced in order to get the information into your email marketing system, okay? Start by evaluating the tech stack and talk to the other people in your organization who are using tech to make sure that the tech they're using, that you're accounting for all of it. Next thing, cost assessment. we think about costs. Obviously, that's why a lot of people make a change. Maybe they're spending too much on their ESP, or they've got, a lot of different tech stack pieces and they're trying to consolidate. So certainly your list size is going to play into that. One thing to keep in mind about list size, a lot of times when we're working on migrations with clients, we do what we call data reconciliation. And that means looking at all the different places where your lists are coming from. And very often we find that there's a lot of duplication in lists. There's a lot of old data in lists that doesn't belong there anymore. So list size is a really relative number. And so while that is important in determining the cost of your ESP, at least in a rough range, it may not be exact. So make sure that you are figuring in that there could be some changes to your list size as you go through this process. Another thing we found is that people who, as they're evaluating their tech stack, realize, wow, we haven't been getting our registrants from our webinars into our ESP because those systems weren't connected. Well, now they're going to be. So how will that affect your list size? Also think about feature fees. There are some providers that have additional features, like something like SMS. So maybe you're going to add SMS because you can do that now through your ESP and you couldn't before. That's going to affect the cost of the overall software. So figure that in your budget, because it's a great opportunity to have another outreach method. But if you're going to use these additional features, know what they cost and make sure you really can and will use them. Seat fees. Some providers charge for additional seats. There are some providers that only allow one login for the entire system, and your IT people may not really like that very much. So you have to think about how the seats are going to work if you're going to have costs associated with that. Another cost, and this is, sort of a hidden cost, is staff training. If you're moving into a new system, you have to train people to use it. And that is going to require potentially bringing in outside resources, or at very least thinking about the off and downtime they're going to have with doing that. Integration software. That tech stack that we talked about before, making sure that that tech stack is coming into your ESP, making sure everything can talk to everything. You may have to build integrations. You may have to pay for integrations. So figure that to your cost assessment as you're looking to build out your new system. And then there is the opportunity cost. Like I said, the downtime of training your staff, that's one piece of it, but there is still usually a transition period when you're moving from your old system to your new system. And that means that you may have a period of time, you may have like 2 or 3 weeks, you can't send email. Now, if you're in a B2B space, that's not usually quite so bad, but for a lot of e-commerce brands, that can be really tough, because if you depend on weekly emails to generate cash flow and you can't send those because you're moving into the new system and you need to make sure all the data syncs, understand that that's coming. Maybe pick a slow time of the year. Maybe pick like 4th of July week or sometime in August when things are typically slow for you, so that you can minimize that opportunity cost for the change. And I'm going through a lot of this really, really quickly. It's because there's a lot to cover. But, obviously, when we're doing migrations with clients, we dive deep into a lot of these different areas, either during the migration, prior to the migration, or after the fact, just to make sure we've covered all the things that are needed. Data organization. Now, this is huge, right? So this is like the big, heavy lift that you have to deal with, and it's not easy. And this is usually the longest part of any project. First of all, you have to think about all of the data repositories that you have. We talked before about the tech stack, and that tends to give you the majority of things that you have. However, maybe you also use QuickBooks or some kind of accounting software, and you actually need to get all of the people who are in there inside of your ESP so that you can send communications related to billing or software updates or something like that to them, right? So even though that tech stack may not need to integrate with your ESP, it's a repository of data that you need to make sure you get a hold of, especially if I've had clients who they had Peachtree and then they moved to QuickBooks. And so they didn't move everything from Peachtree into QuickBooks because those old clients were not working with them anymore. But guess what? You might still have to send them software update notices or billing information or compliance messages. That means you need to go into that data repository of stuff you're not really using anymore, but has relevant people in it, and bring that into the data reconciliation that you're going to do as you move to your ESP. Sales lists. Very often with the sales team, you'll have a CRM, but not everything goes into the CRM. They don't put a lead into the CRM until they've qualified that lead as something like, this is a real breathing human at a real company that we're qualified to talk to, okay? So they may have lists, and they may not be putting them all into the CRM. This expediently as they should, because that happens, right? So understand, where are these sales lists? What are they? Are they qualified? Should they be receiving email? Have they opted in? Again, you need to know where all the data is so that you can reconcile it together. Website reference. If you haven't already talked to your webmaster about bringing information into your email migration program. Also, what about past people who have visited the website, people who might be users of the website? Maybe you have partners, distributors, OEM partners who have a login to your website because they use a portal for ordering. Are we bring that information into the ESP because they have to get product information and updates? Webinar attendees, trade show leads. There's a lot of places where data can come from. And if you haven't yet done, and especially if you don't have a CRM or you're adding a CRM as part of this process, this is the time to get all of that data together, bring it together and start reconciling the things. Maybe you have someone who's in the sales lead list who someone else from their company attended a trade show. Somebody else from their company was at a webinar. So now you actually have that information for that company in 3 different places, but none of them are in your email marketing system because none of it's actually moved forward into a place that you can track. This is the time to figure that out before you move into your new ESP. All right, so now we have all the data. We know where it's coming from. We know all the tech that's going to lead into it. We understand the different use cases for all the different data we have and how we should be talking to these people. Now we're ready for the move, the migration itself. What does the migration actually look like? The first and most important thing that you need to do is get your suppression list together. Your suppression list is all of the people who have previously said, do not send me email, okay? Maybe it's do not send me email because they hit the unsubscribe button. Maybe they have bounced too many times. It's an invalid address. Maybe their domain is just bad. Maybe they're a competitor and you say, we probably really shouldn't be sending anything to anyone at this domain, okay? But put together that list of people who should never, ever, ever get email from you and start there. That's the first group that you want to bring in. You want to bring them in and you want to mark them as unsubscribed, do not send email to. Okay, you start there so that you don't accidentally send something to someone who shouldn't be getting it. First place to start. All right, now you're going to look at your subscribers. So your subscribers would be, as you qualify them, people who have opted in, people who are customers of yours, past customers, partners, referral partners, whatever it is. So these are your subscribers. Make sure when you're bringing them in, you bring in their user preferences. So let's say you sell software and you have different types of software for different use cases. Make sure that when you're bringing people in, if you know from the CRM or from webinars that they registered for, there are specific pieces of software that they are interested in, opt them in for those, but not necessarily everything, because you don't want to send them information they're not interested in. They become more likely to unsubscribe if that happens. Now, think about segmentation. So user preference is what they want to get from you. Segmentation is how you want to send information to them. So think about things like, they've attended a bunch of webinars, so they're probably interested in attending webinars. Great. Invite them, put them on your webinar segment list. Maybe they are located in a particular part of a country or internationally. Use the data that you have from your CRM, from your other list sources, to segment that data so that you can send them really targeted messages as much as you can. And then think about behavioral data. What have they done? Have they been on your website? Have they purchased something? Have they opened a lot of emails? Have they clicked on a lot of emails? What does their behavior look like with your brand? If you can understand their behavior, you can build segmentation based on that data. So bring that in as well. So obviously, personalization is important. We're making the assumption that if you've got all this tech stack and the CRM, everything else, you're bringing in their first name, their last name, their business or organization name, and that type of information. But make sure that as you bring these things in, think about how you can use each piece of data to provide better quality email. Making a move is expensive. It is difficult. It is time consuming. Your email should be better after the fact. It should not be worse. And it's by using their preferences and being able to segment data and use what you know about them to provide really relevant information that will make better email. All right. Now we talk about feature activation. So different ESPs have different features. What features do you want to think about and how do you want to use them? So think about subscription features, pop-ups, forms, interstitials. How are you going to draw new people into your list? Now, again, feature activation does also depend on some of your other systems. Maybe you're using a CRM, and when people subscribe, you want to send them through the CRM before they get to the ESP. Totally fine. But if you don't have that option, or maybe it's kind of difficult to do that, or maybe not everyone goes in your CRM. Maybe only really qualified leads go into your CRM. So your ESP is a place where you pre-qualify people by collecting their information. So think about how you can use these features to try to bring more people in and grow your list. Landing pages. Now, maybe you use separate software for landing pages, which is fine. So a lot of ESPs do have some kind of landing page feature. So if you have that, can you use that? How would you activate it? And how does it interact with the rest of your tech stack to make sure your data is being shared across systems effectively? If you're using SMS, this is the time to start thinking about it. Now you've brought everybody in. Now, if the intended move is email only, great, you're set up for email. Now you want to layer in SMS. If, however, you are layering in SMS with email, I'm going to take you back to that migration stage. We're bringing in the data. Make sure you're bringing in the phone numbers you need for SMS messaging so that you can set things up. And then, of course, integrations. We've got the other tech stack. We got things to talk to each other. Now's the time to make sure we're getting things talking to each other and sending data appropriately. Now, there's lots of other features you're going to have with your ESP. You're going to have automation. You're going to have checkout features with your e-commerce store or your donor software or whatever. There's lots of other things. But, make sure you've got your data in there before you start flipping switches on things, because you can't tell if things aren't working if there's no data in the system. Now that everything's in there, fantastic. We're going to warm up your domain if it needs it. How do you know if you need to do a warm up? Well, first of all, if you have a brand new domain, if it's a new company or you're changing things or you're setting up a new domain, absolutely you need to warm up your domain. You may also need a subdomain. We typically look at subdomains for cases where maybe the domain is a little bit sketchy. We've had a lot of spam reports. We've had, some bad interactions because maybe we were using an ESP that wasn't really filtering out the garbage as well as it should have, right? And a lot of IT departments will say, yes, we'd love to use a subdomain. Please set one up. Why do we use it? We use it because it it protects your domain a little bit from a lot of negative reporting that comes back from bad sender reputation. Okay, so do you need one? This is a deeper discussion that you'd have with your IT department. Remember when I said the right people in the room? IT is one of them. IT, webmaster, these are the people you need to bring in, and they'll tell you whether or not you need a subdomain. List expansion. Say you're growing your list, right? For some of the clients that we work with who are setting up an ESP for the first time, or they're moving from another system, they've basically either they merged with another company, and so they have to bring two lists together, which means while both of the lists have existed for a while, for part of that list, this is going to be a new domain, okay? Because they may not know about the merger yet, or they may not have a lot of information. It can just be that you've acquired another company, that you're part of a big organization. For whatever reason, your list has grown significantly. You're emailing a whole bunch of people who haven't been hearing from you before, or maybe it's just been a really long time since you've sent email. These are all reasons why you're going to want to warm things up before you start sending email to 30,000 people all at once. One of the ways we warm it up is with a seed list, and I do recommend everyone, if they're setting anything up new, always have a seed list. A seed list is going to be comprised of a couple dozen or so people who are known to you, whose email addresses are known to you, that you can survey after you send something. So you'll send an email to that 24 people, and you'll say, okay, I want you to open that on your phone. So what it looks like, make sure it's loading right. Which box did it land in? Did it land in spam? Did it make it to the promotions folder? Where is it landing? What does it look like? Your seed list will usually include several different, so you can use, your own domain is fine, but you really want to send it to things that are not your domain. So Gmail addresses, Yahoo addresses, public addresses, as well as maybe some corporate addresses that would be in your field. Use that seed list to test periodically, just to make sure that things are going through as they should and showing up as they should. You have to remember there's been a lot of changes lately with how Google, Yahoo, Apple Mail, all of these tech providers and how they work. So, is your email going to land in the promotions folder? Maybe it will. It's not necessarily a bad thing. You don't want to be in the spam folder, obviously, but landing in the promotions folder isn't bad, because keep in mind that when your subscriber is sitting there going through their work day, If you are not a work message and you are in the work folder, they're more likely to ignore you. They know what's in the promotions folder. It's going to be the coupons, the discounts, the what I'm going to do this evening, the entertainment type of thing. So if you land in the promotion folder, that's okay. That's where they would expect to get that information and where they're more likely to actually interact with it. So promotions folder isn't bad. Spam folder is bad. That's when you want to work on. All right. So now you've gone through all of this. You've done your warm up. You're sending email. Now you got to figure out if what you're sending is actually working, especially compared to your last system. And this is where we talk about analytics. You need to have some KPIs. As you're working on your migration plan, understand what success looks like for you. Success should not be measured by an open rate. Okay, first of all, we know very well that open rates are a little bit sketchy today because with privacy controls and things like that going on, open rates aren't really open rates. Stuff's open on the mail server and it doesn't necessarily get through to the person until a couple of opens later. So we know that opens are a little sketchy. Certainly click rates are something valid, but are they clicking to where you want them to click? Are they going to the pages you want them to get through? Think about that. Think about this. As you're merging all of this data, you have an expectation of what your list size should be. And then there's what your list size actually ended up with. So it's good to take a look at that and say, are we meeting expectations? Do we need to set some goals for growth numbers for this year? Because when we bring everything together, we realized, wow, we're 10,000 names less than we thought we were because, we had data in different places and we weren't, reconciling it correctly. Think about KPIs as far as subscribe and unsubscribe rates. An unsubscribe rate is a really, really important number. If people who you believe are qualified to receive your emails are getting your emails and they are unsubscribing at a 1, 2, or 3% unsubscribe rate, that's a problem. It means that there's something wrong with what you're sending or with how you're segmenting to put people in to receive the right information. So sending some KPIs for unsubscribe rate. And the thing with unsubscribe is that's fairly easy to look back at your past ESP and your current ESP and have a measure. Not necessarily the rate, but you can certainly look at the numbers and say, if we sent something to 10,000 people, how many people unsubscribed before? How many people are unsubscribing now? Deliverability. Are things hitting the inbox? Were they hitting the inbox before? Are they hitting it now? These are all types of measures. So you want to set your KPIs based on the problems you were having before and what you were trying to solve and the goals that you have moving forward. And then you want to look at some comparative metrics. For the first 6 months at least, you should be looking at what you did in your old provider and what the KPIs were there compared to your new provider. Because as I said, not everybody's going to count it open the same way. Not everybody's going to count a click the same way. I'm not necessarily looking for a number to number comparison. What I'm looking at is a performance metric. What level of engagement did I get over there? What was it landing in the inbox? Did people then do something with it? Is it landing in the inbox now? Now, one of the analytic numbers that we see change a lot is when you move from one provider. Some providers are, we'll say, a little less stringent about their rules about who can be on a list and how often you can email them and what they call a deliver versus some others, right? So in certain providers, when you're working with them, they're going to say, no, that we don't consider that delivered. We can't tell you that it was necessarily delivered, so we don't consider it delivered. So it might look like your deliverability is lower. Dig in and understand those numbers so you can compare what you were doing to what you're doing now so that you can find success. Okay, I talked really fast. Sorry about that, but I want to get through all of it. These are some of the things that we think about when we're planning a migration. Obviously, each one of those is a very deep dive into what more you do from there. This should give you an overview of what you're thinking about for migration and how you'd like to move forward. But now would be a great time for questions if anybody has any.
I can talk since I just went through a migration and we switched over to MailChimp. This was it was very helpful. It gave me a little bit of shivers because it was like we were transferring over to MailChimp and it was a big process. And unfortunately, we didn't have the time to do it during a downtime. We actually did probably during one of our top 2 busiest times. And I was new, so it was quite the start to my time at Nixa. And then
baptism by fire, maybe?
Yes, that's what I was looking for. I knew it was something with fire. I was looking for the right word. Oh, yes, that's exactly what it was. But so like one thing, and this might be pertinent to everyone, but like the one thing that we're struggling with is like obviously we're a small organization, we're having trouble like utilizing all of these great features that Mailchimp has to offer, but like automation, like I've been saying for months that we're going to set up automation. That's tough, but like I know that you've been really helpful in teaching me and Ellie, but like the resends, like little things that
Mhm.
Mailchimp has, and
Yeah.
like resends for us has been amazing. Like that feature is so great, and then we've been trying to experiment with sending like things on like Sunday, so it's like we're really in that experimental mode. And on
Great.
weekends, like Sunday, like even like I'm guilty of it and I hate this, but like Sunday night when I'm like the kids are in bed, I'm looking through my email to kind of prep for the next day, and it's like we're getting great I know open rates aren't necessarily the best metric, but like even click rates, and we got like some registration boosts from that from our events,
Yeah.
and it's been really helpful. But so I don't really know if there's a question in here, but I'm just saying like it's been really helpful to be a part of these meetings. And then I know that I'll probably be in contact for the automation thing. It's just I haven't had any time, but even just the most simple automation I think will be really helpful since we are new to the system and we want to use all the bells and whistles that it has to offer. But yeah, Resend has been awesome.
Great.
Something that we struggle with, and I don't know if you maybe this is the question, but this is something that we struggle with, and since we're the financial industry and there's a million firewalls you have to get through, like
Mhm.
is getting those bounces, those not like we have people that are members that are get our Gmail emails that will send like one off to them, but they won't get our MailChimp emails, and then they go through their firewalls, like they ask their company to allow us like whitelist us. That's
Yeah.
the term, I think, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a true.
but my question is like, are there any other best practices to get through? Like get like I did the reconfirm
Yep.
email. I
Hmm.
set up that. I
Opt
sent
in.
that to
Yep.
people. Hopefully, I didn't look. I didn't check the statistics to see if
Yeah.
it made any bit of a difference. But I sent it to like 700 people. But my question is like, what are maybe some suggestions to do that? Like,
Okay. Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah. So financial industry is tough. You definitely have the firewall issue. There's only so much that you can do. What I would strongly recommend is having an explanation of of how to whitelist us. Okay. So you need them to personally whitelist you and then maybe go to their organization and have it whitelisted. So I would have that somewhere on your website where you have like member information because members specifically want this information. They joined the organization for a reason. So make sure that you have that in place where people can see it and you can refer them to it. Okay, that's the first piece. Automation, as much as you haven't had time for it, is ironically one of the best ways to get through. Because what we find is that when someone signs up, if you immediately, the double opt in is great, right? So they get the message and then they opt in. So they're getting that message. But what can happen is their systems can start to block it because they think that they shouldn't be getting it. So the sooner you use that automation, just sending them information that they click on and engage with. Okay. So, for example, one thing that's great for associations, professional associations, is you send them like a welcome email that clicks over to like a video or an article or something that would be like really pertinent to their new membership, right? So you bring them in because they're going to get that when they first sign up. They're real excited. They'll click on everything, right? So use the automation. So as soon as they sign up, boom, they're getting something that they're going to engage with right away and hit them up at least a few times over 2 weeks. The magic number somewhere around 21 days, but if you can get a certain level of engagement, I mean, it's all theoretical, but basically, if I talk to all my MailChimp friends, we're all going to tell you that, like, if you can hit people up like 3 to 4 times in the first like 21 days, you tend to see higher overall engagement rates. So you can use automation for that by hitting them up with some really great things that they want to click on that give them a download, give them a video, get whatever it is that engages your users, which you should have an idea now from some of the stuff you've been sending, what they tend to like. Just make sure that you send that multiple times. If they're engaging with your emails, you're less likely to be blocked. What tends to happen is you send them an email and then it's 3 or 4 weeks before they get the next email. And so the system goes, nope, not relevant, block it out. So you need to get going with them quickly. Also, getting going with them quickly, they are going to notice if you don't show up. And they will reach out to you and say, hey, Kevin, I thought I was supposed to get my download. I haven't seen it yet. What happened? And then you can point them to your page with the whitelisting information, say, oh, make sure you've whitelisted us. We might be landing in your spam folder, or your IT department might be blocking. Here's the information you need. They'll actually make that effort early on as a new subscriber to your list, more likely than later on down the road. That said, if you have a really good prize for them, they'll still do it. Just give them something really good that they want and you'll get them to interact with you. But that's why you should, if that's one of your challenges, that's your cue to prioritize automation, because that will work for you. And re-engagement emails. So you can do that with all the new people, but then you're going to have all those people who have been on your list forever, right? So use re-engagement automation to get the same thing to happen, right? So you're going to use an automation when people go however long without clicking anything or opening anything, or however you want to put together your metric. And they get a certain automation that sends them content that is enticing to click, and it sends them multiple emails in a short span of time so that they are likely to engage quite a few times. That will help. Okay. And then you can also, I don't know how often do you guys email your list? Like, the majority of people, how often do they hear from you?
We like at least once a week, but I mean, like in crunch time for trying to boost registration for events, it's like this week I'm sending it to the full list like 2 to 3 times.
Okay, that's fair. Well, I mean, it's an event, so that makes sense. Make sure that you exclude people who have clicked on the email, because again, you don't want them ignoring emails because they already registered before, right? So just make sure you're segmenting so that when you're sending 2 or 3 in advance of an event, that if people are already registered or people clicked on the last email, don't send it 24 hours right away, right?
Yeah.
Segment them out. Make sure that try to pull a segment of anybody that hasn't heard from you in at least a couple of weeks, right? So if there's people who are being left out because the segmentation of what you're doing is real specific, oh, we're doing seminars about this, so these people get it. So if there's anyone who's not hearing from you at least every couple of weeks, that's when they're likely to start lapsing, and you might end up not getting through to them. So that's where you want to have an automation that can be set up that says, hey, if they haven't been sent any emails, send them something, send them a poll, send them a survey, right? Because again, they'll click on that and you can maybe collect some relevant data for your membership that they would care about. Okay. Keep them clicking. I want you to keep clicking.
With the people who open, like I usually make a list like once a week I export everyone from our Salesforce, like, oh, these people already registered, and then I exclude them from the mailing list if they registered, just so you don't bug them.
Right.
But, like, I love the resend one because you can do it for like the custom advanced segment, whatever it is. It automatically sends it to people that didn't open it.
Yeah.
And like you can even do that. Like, do you think it's okay to send that? Like, for the first time ever, last week I did that twice. So I sent it and then I resent the resend to people again, and it still gets like 5 or 6 more percent. So like, instead of just sending it once to get a 20% open rate, and I know open rate's not the best indicator, but like then the second time it gets 10%, and then the third time it gets another 6% with a couple more clicks. Like, I do see registrations. It's just these people are mostly like executives at major financial firms, and it's like, they usually just throw it away. But if you happen to get in front of them at that right moment, it works. So do you think that's okay to do that?
Like, it's totally fine. I think the one thing I would suggest is when you get to the third one, maybe update the subject line just so that it's not exactly the same thing, because it may just be that they're whatever it is hasn't captivated. Sometimes it's strictly timing, right? They're busy executives. They don't have a lot of time for things. You caught them when they had 27 things to go through in their inbox and they just can't get to it. That's fine. So by you sending it again, maybe you get them at a better time. But when you get to the third time, I would definitely try a different subject line if you didn't. Or the other thing to do is A/B split test your subject line the first time, see which one performs better. So that way, because sometimes the subject line, if you're using like, webinar event, this is the date, this is the time. Some people will immediately respond for that because they're looking for a webinar, and some people just tune it out. And so if you change it up a little bit, you might get them to pay attention.
Mhm. Okay.
So, but yeah, no, I'd send it. I definitely have. We used to run a trade show for an organization, and we would send information like 3 or 4 times because we knew that the audience we were talking to, we were never going to reach them during weekdays because they were too busy running their businesses to pay attention to the messages that we had to send. So we'd send it during the week to get some people, but a lot of them would not open until the weekend because that's the time when they'd work on the business, because during the week they were working in the business. So,
Yeah.
all right, cool. All right, Sabrina, anything on your end?
Nothing on my end, but this was lovely as always. I appreciate you having me.
Glad you could join us today. So
Likewise.
thank you for coming, everyone. So we'll have another one of these next month. I don't off the top of my head know the date. Maybe Lauren does.
Marianne, I never know the date on the tip for these. It is, I believe, the 25th of February.
Okay. All right. So we will definitely send out information about that. So thank you for joining. I hope you got a few good little nuggets for today. We will post this up on our YouTube channel so you can share it with others. And if you're working on any email migration, or you have questions about how to deal with that enormous monster that is migration, feel free to send questions our way. We're happy to answer them.